Good to be back with you all again for one more session. I tell you what, you all know how to get the nickels out of your keynoters between two workshops this morning and then two keynote presentations. But it's my privilege to have a chance to talk this morning about pension fund and about ministerial relief and assistance and how we're making a difference in the world. For those of you that have not had the opportunity yet to pick up a flyer back in the back, if you are a pastor, hopefully you will be joining us in New Orleans September 8th through the 10th of 2020 for the retreat, a gathering for clergy, active, retired, doesn't matter, we want to see you there. If your pastor is not here, take a flyer back and encourage them to register. We are underwriting this with the Lilly Endowment, the Ministerial Relief and Assistance Endowment, and the Heartbeats of Faith Endowment for Clergy Health and Wellness. Which means the registration, including 2 nights in the hotel, 2 breakfasts, and a lunch, plus the conference, is $100 if your home congregation worships 99 or fewer, and $150 if you worship 100 or more. So there's no reason that every pastor shouldn't be there, except the event is limited by space to 500 people. And as soon as we launched registration, we had almost 150 people registered immediately. So make sure that you take this back and encourage your pastor to be there. They can purchase additional book-in nights on either side of the conference. It's coming off of Labor Day weekend, so it'll be a fun time for them to get down and get some rest, and a wonderful opportunity for them to gather with their colleagues, which is really important in maintaining health and vitality in ministry. So I hope that you'll promote that back in your local congregations to your pastoral staff. Well, if last night I parachuted into the podium at the last minute, tonight, I have the privilege of blowing in, blowing off, and blowing out. As soon as this session is over, I am headed back to Dallas to be able to catch a flight home first thing tomorrow to get ready for a very full day of meetings on Monday morning. I think when you move into the administrative life of the church, meetings are job security, but I will literally sit down at a table at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, and except for calling a break for bio needs, not leave that seat until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is my typical Monday morning, because, well, I've been here in Texas since Wednesday. I'm going on to West Virginia next weekend, and then from there to Lexington, Kentucky, and then on to a meeting in Baltimore, and then on to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So another 10-day swing out on the road. So you got to cram a lot in on the days you're actually around and into the office. But last night we asked the question, for whom am I to make the world a better place? And then this morning, Olin did a nice job of dovetailing with how, by letting our light shine and by offering and receiving a measure of grace to one another and from one another, and the understanding that God expects fruit from us. That God has given us the grace to grow, and now what are we going to do with it? So tonight, I want us to think about these words from John Wesley, who said and who wrote, "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can." Do what you can to make the world a better place, is what Wesley is saying. It's a strong admonishment to do something. It is a reminder to us that even though we are not saved by our works, our faith is dead without our works. Scriptures time and time call us again to faith that is action-oriented. As we mentioned last night, Micah 6:8, do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. These are action-oriented words. Jesus was constantly ordering and instructing his disciples, either individually or collectively, to be active, to do something. I mean, if you think of just about a general broadcast of the Gospels recording the activities of Jesus, we find him and the disciples feeding someone, clothing someone, healing someone, calling them to get out of the boat, to not be afraid, to go into the world, to make disciples, to do something. And I think if we don't walk away with anything else from this weekend, I hope we all walk away convicted to go out into the world and to do something for someone who can't do anything for us, in an effort to make their life better, and then ultimately having the outcome of making the world a better place. It starts with one person doing one thing. It's not this grand vision of if I could just get 100,000 people to do this, then the world would be better. It's one person doing one thing to make one difference in one life that starts to have that ripple effect and makes the world a better place. Because the gospel call is an action-oriented call that is formed within the walls of the church and transformed by the way we carry it into the streets of our communities and the communities that are around us. Sister Sylvia Schmidt was the executive director of Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries when I was in junior high and high school, and was an early influencer on my theological development around justice matters. Sister Sylvia said that God had called us as Christians to be harassers of the institutions and the religious communities and high-class beggars for the poor. And what she meant by that was to never accept any canned institutional response, and in everything you do something for someone who can do nothing for you. Her admonishment to us then as young people, I was either in 8th grade or maybe 9th grade when she came and spoke to our youth group, was to never forget that God will put you in places and resource you to act. But the choice comes down to whether or not you respond and take action in the moment when the opportunity presents itself. Your level of faithfulness is measured then by how do you respond when one of these gospel moments arises before you. Whether or not in that moment you do all you can, by the means that you can, in the ways that you can, in the places that you can, at the times that you can, to the people that you can, as long as ever you can. When I think back, or I think about how my life might be reconciled someday with the gospel, my biggest fear is that I would have been entrusted with an opportunity to respond to a moment when I could have done something but chose not to. That I had an opportunity to live out either the Great Commandment or the Great Commission, and was so preoccupied with my own needs and my own agenda and my own family and my own to-do list and the things that I wanted to get done, that I missed out on the opportunity of what God needed me to do. For 7 years, I was the senior minister at Memorial Drive Christian Church in Houston, on the near west side of Houston. When the church was built in 1967, it actually said in the documents, the realtor had suggested that they not buy the property 5 miles further west out towards Derry Ashford, because the city of Houston was never going to grow west of Derry Ashford. The intersection of Memorial Drive and Bunker Hill is now the geographic dead center of the metroplex of what is considered the city of Houston. But one of our outreach projects there was we partnered with Christ Church Episcopal's mobile medical clinic. We started providing meatball sandwiches to homeless teenagers, about 100 of them, twice a week. Now there are about 30,000 homeless teens, not people, teens on the streets in Houston. It is very much so a subculture of the city, but this community of so, broken down into various communities, but this community of 100 or so was very well organized and very good at providing support and care to one another. The least of these working to share the limited resources that they had with one another. And we learned lots of lessons about life being out on the streets with the teens. Have you ever thought about how expensive it actually is to be homeless? Think about it if you are homeless and you actually get a job and you have one, if you're lucky, 2 sets of clothes, and you've got to show up at work the next day. Most likely the place that's going to hire you to begin with is going to be something where you're going to come back smelling like work. A fast food restaurant maybe, or something that where you're using your hands or you're out doing something outdoors. And you've got to go wash your clothes, and you've got to go to a laundromat. How long has it been since anybody's been to a laundromat? It's kind of a humbling experience today to go to one. But if you think about the cost of a laundromat, and the fact that you need to have bills that can be broken down into change, but wait, you haven't gotten paid yet because you just went back to work. And if you've ever had to buy laundry detergent in a laundromat, it costs you like $6 or $7 to go in and wash a load of clothes, and you've only got 1 set of clothes to wash, so you're spending $6 or $7 every single day, and it's just a minimum requirement to help you break this cycle of homelessness. So we started working with the kids and giving them things like laundry bags with soap and quarters to be able to go wash their clothes for the ones that were working. But we also would bring in these meals twice a week that we would start warming up the food and assemble the sandwiches at the church. And we had two sisters, Virginia and Shirley, who were self-described as God's frozen chosen. Now they had come to Memorial Drive from the Presbyterian church where they had gotten upset, and they were pretty frozen. I mean, they looked like they had stepped out of the 1950s. Wonderful, adorable women. They had never married, but every Friday they had an appointment at what they affectionately called the redo shop. And there was enough spray net on their hair, I think, to cause its own hole in the ozone. But they were in church every Sunday, pleated skirts, pressed blouses, fixed hair, simple shoes, and their little small clutch purses that always coordinated with their shoes. Now on one Tuesday, they surprised me and they showed up. Now I had never seen them wear pants to anything. They would volunteer at Vacation Bible School and get down on the floor in their pleated skirts because they did not believe in wearing pants. And they showed up to help prepare meatball sandwiches. And they confessed that, the only reason their condo had a kitchen was because it came with it when they bought it, but they wouldn't have put one in if it wasn't already there because they didn't really know how to cook. But they felt like they wanted to get involved somehow with this homeless ministry that they were hearing about. And after about a month of preparing the food, they asked if they could go out on one of the deliveries. And I was shocked. Here were two very prim, proper, established women that this just was so out of characteristic for them. And when we arrived, and of course now it's dark, and we're in a parking lot, and there's a mobile clinic in the background with the generator running, they clung to one another in the church van like sheets that had no dryer sheet when it went through the dryer, or your swim trunks when you're getting out of the pool, because they were not leaving this secure spot. But the next week, they came back, and they volunteered again, and they asked to go on the delivery again. And slowly but surely, week after week, they began to kind of peel themselves away from the church van, but they still stayed right next to each other with their little clutch purses. And they started to interact some with some of the kids, especially the moms, who were teenage moms who had babies who were out on the street. And then about another month into this, I noticed that they had brought larger purses. Now, I had never seen them carry a purse bigger than this, and I'm a pretty observant person, but they brought these larger purses. And so I paid attention, and I started watching and observing. Your ministers pay attention to what you're doing, by the way, in case you don't know. I can recite about half of my elders' prayers before they even prayed them at the table every time because they said the same words. But I noticed that they would get out of the van and they would look around, and Black Rose, who was kind of the main person organizing this community, and they would kind of nod to Black Rose and step to the back of the van. And then she would come around the corner. And so I went and I stood on the side and I kind of tried to peek around and see what was actually going on. And I watched them open these larger purses and hand her shoes. And I watched her walk across the parking lot and go and hand two pairs of shoes, one to two different individuals. And then I watched her come back over and get paper and pencil from Virginia and Shirley and go over and trace the outline of two other people's feet and come back and hand them the paper. It turns out they had been smuggling shoes into the community and didn't want anybody to know that the Frozen Chosen had melted a little bit and had a soft spot for these kids in their hearts. And they were slowly working their way through 100 kids, providing them shoes. And they would take the traced outline of their feet and they would use that then to figure out what size shoes the kids needed and bring them back the next week and pass them off to Black Rose, who would be their kind of dealer, I guess, their intermediary, who would deliver the shoes and bring back another pattern for the next week. The Frozen Chosen had melted a little bit. Their hearts had softened a little bit. But they were doing all the good that they could, by all the means that they could, in all the ways that they could, and they did it for as long as they could. I truly believe God puts us in these places and in these moments and gives us the opportunity to respond in a manner that we have been shaped and formed by the church, so that the gospel is the part of our response of God's good news in the world. But the real question that confronts us is whether or not we are faithful enough to act in the moment. Whether or not we're faithful enough to act in the moment. Because our call is to be an actor on behalf of God when these moments arrive. 14 years ago, we were all dealing with the tragedy known as Hurricane Katrina. And at this point, probably date-wise, we're not close, but maybe a couple of days out from Hurricane Rita making landfall in southeast Texas. I remember both experiences very well, because with Katrina we had the influx of people, 100,000 people arriving in the city of Houston with nowhere to go and nowhere for us to put them, as they were trying to open the old Astrodome and the George R. Brown and figure out how they were going to feed all these people. And I remember the mayor issuing a call to the churches saying, I think you guys know how to feed people. Can we get all of the churches to come together and have one conference and one conversation on how we're going to feed all of these people who are coming to our city? These were the least of these in New Orleans who had no other means to get out on their own. And so we figured out a strategy by how we were going to feed them. But then as groups began to be dispersed around the city of Houston, we were asked to adopt different groups. And at Memorial Drive, we had probably half, if not 2/3 of our families connected to the oil industry. They had lived in New Orleans, they had family in New Orleans, they had done business in New Orleans, they had associates in New Orleans. And so we had a really strong response. We raised $70,000 for Week of Compassion in 1 week. As a congregation, because the connection was so deep to the plight of what was going on in New Orleans. And that money came back to us into Week of Compassion, and we adopted a senior housing community. And I'll never forget this. This is one of those moments as a pastor that forms you and shapes you for the rest of your life. We had 100 seniors that were in a brand new government subsidized housing project that they opened up early, issued the permits to get them in. Mattress Mac, for those of you who are familiar with him, lived in the Houston area, you know Mattress Mac. He donated 100 beds, and our job was to go out and figure out how to furnish 100 apartments. So we went to every Target and Walmart within a radius of the church, and we bought sheets and blankets and pillowcases and pillows and coffee pots, and we loaded up SUV after SUV after SUV, and then we had all this stuff that had been dumped on the doorsteps of the church, the tables and chairs and all sorts of stuff that we were trying to organize. And our fellowship hall and our gymnasium looked like a thrift store, and it was great. And Ben Boren, who was then the regional minister in Northern California and Nevada, had called me right after Katrina, and he said, Todd, what do you guys need? And I said, Ben, I think what we need right now are towels. And he said, okay, we'll get you towels. We've got people that want to respond out here on the West Coast. We want to help out. I know you're on the ground. If you think you need towels, we're going to put out a call for towels. I think that poor UPS man is probably still out on a work comp claim somewhere. Because if you ever ship towels somewhere, don't go get like a refrigerator box and load it up with towels. Those boxes were so heavy, but day after day after day, towels and hand towels and washcloths and bath towels kept arriving from our churches in Northern California and Nevada. I mean, we had yellow towels, brown towels, blue towels, pink towels, purple towels, white towels. We had towels that were so unique, you knew why they had been donated to the church. So we got everything set up. We bussed on 100 seniors. We chartered 2 buses on Sunday morning. We brought them in for worship. We had lunch set up in the fellowship hall, and then they had the opportunity to go shopping. Underwear, house coats, slippers over here, coffee pots, toasters, you name it over here. Miscellaneous furniture items, don't ever leave those on the doorstep of a church that you don't go to. Broken chairs, whatever that we were trying to fix, over here in this corner. And then we had just this massive area of towels. And it was great because they were excited and they were shopping and they were getting to choose some things to set up their own household. But I had had lunch that day with Miss Ruby, who was somewhere in her 80s, and her daughter, who was in her early 60s, and they were both sharing this one apartment together, and they were so gracious and so grateful and just so glad to have had a place to shower and sleep, and to have had a place to worship, and to have gathered at the communion table, and now to be breaking bread with us. And so I'm just kind of going around as people are shopping, and they're just, gracious, gracious people. And I got over to the towel area, and Miss Ruby was standing there, and she was clutching these towels and just sobbing. And I said, Miss Ruby, what's going on? And she said, "Preacher, you got yellow towels." And I said, "Yeah, we got yellow towels, brown towels, blue towels, pink towels, purple towels, white towels. You can take as many towels as you want. Here's some over here that are so unique." And she said, "No, you don't understand. You've got yellow towels." And I said, "Well, tell me why yellow towels are so special to you." And she said, "You don't understand. I was born in New Orleans. I live in the house that my parents raised me in. I have ridden out every storm, every flood, every hurricane, every tropical storm that has come through that city in that house. We've never had water in that house. I had no reason to leave. I had no means to leave, but I had no reason to leave because every storm, my family's house had been fine. My daughter's house usually flooded, so she would come to my house. So she was at my house when the storm hit. But this storm was like no other storm that I had ever seen before. And as the waters continued to rise, we decided it was time to get up on the countertops in our kitchen. And we got up there, and the water continued to rise, and it came in the house for the first time, and then it continued to rise inside the house, and our neighbor came over and swam in with a raft through the front of the house through the windows and said, "Miss Ruby, we got to get out of here. It's time to go." And she said, "But I've never left before." So here she is in her 80s, climbing down into a raft to float her way out of her house. And she said, "I started praying because I knew that one of two things was going to happen. Either the storm had passed enough that we would be able to float inland to higher ground, or the storm was still coming in and it was going to carry us out to sea and ultimately to our death. But we had to get out and be safe." And as I prayed and as I looked around, I saw pictures of my parents that were now floating around the house. I saw the flag that was given to me when my husband, a veteran, had passed away and was buried with military honors. And I saw my yellow towels. And I had saved for 3 months to buy myself new towels, and I just wanted yellow towels. And you've got yellow towels. And I know that I can begin again. My friends, how we make the world a better place is we make the most out of the opportunities that God presents to us. We stay woke. We watch for the moments that God puts us in places and gives us a chance to serve. I mean, all I did was answer a phone call that said, "Yeah, send us some towels." All I did was put out a call that said, "Hey people, this is a need, let's respond to it." And our people rallied around the cause because God put us in that place and in that moment to try and make the best out of it. We had a chance to serve, and we had a choice to say, "Praise be to God, it made a right turn and didn't hit us," or to do something for those who were in need. So as you think about your theme, and you think about where you go from here, and the words that my brother Olin will leave you with in the morning, my challenge to you, my friends, is that in every time and in every place, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. And indeed, at the end, you will make this world a better place. Thanks be to God. Amen.